Y'all know what it is.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. It is 2021, and we are going to start the year off right. Today we have a special guest. His name is Jason DeFillippo. Jason is an award-winning podcast producer, editor, and host. He is the co-creator and co-host of the popular podcast Grumpy Old Geeks. His production credits consist of a literal who's who of the top podcasts in the business, including some of the most downloaded shows on the internet. His clients include The Jordan Harbinger Show, The Tim Ferriss Show, The Gladiator Way, and The Kevin Rose Show. Since 1994, well before his foray into the wide world of podcasting, Jason was a web developer on the leading edge of technology. Before hanging up his keyboard in 2015, he launched more than 250 websites for major companies like Paramount Pictures and Disney. Here to talk about the evolution of the internet and technology, transitioning from a successful career to explore the relatively unknown, and to share his experiences working with the best of the best in the business, please join us in welcoming to the show, Jason DeFillippo.
Woo! Where's the fanfare? Where's the fanfare?
We put it in post.
Yeah. All right. That's my job.
All right.
Well, cool. Well, welcome, Jason. I think obviously in the intro, we covered a lot of territory in terms of your career, but you're kind of an interesting cat. So maybe it makes a little sense to just kind of start at the beginning, get a little bit of groundwork laid on who you are and where you come from.
And actually, your beginning dates way back to like 1994 in the web-based days. And just to put some context into that, I think 94 was when the first website was even launched by Tim Berners-Lee. So if you've been in the web,
that's pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got some history here. Can you kind of maybe break down your career for us a little bit?
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. My first website was one of the first 10,000 on the web. It was called Spew. It was me and my girlfriend. We did a lot of pictures of naked girls and funny stuff, and I yelled at stupid people. So some things never changed, but that site went on to be nominated for the first Webby Awards back in the day under the sex category, which they have scrubbed from history. I still have proof that I was there, though. I was there. But that got me a job working for Epson. If you remember back in the day, they were doing zip drives. They were like the OEM for zip drives, but they were selling printers and stuff. So I got flown to California from Chicago, where I was an overnight Kinko's employee doing desktop publishing. I went from desktop publishing at Kinko's in Oak Brook, Illinois, to living in Hollywood doing a website, like a multi-million-dollar website in 1995. Wow. And from there, it just kind of went up. And I'd always loved Star Trek. And I said, hey, I'm in Hollywood now. They make Star Trek here. I want to work for the guys that make Star Trek. And within the first 18 months of landing in Hollywood, I was the head website programmer for Paramount Motion Pictures and stayed there for a couple of years. Did Titanic there, did Star Trek First Contact. That was my first Star Trek movie. And did that for 20 some years after that. So that was the web side of things.
So was computer science your degree? And
hell no, I was a photographer.
And you just picked it up on the side, and that ended up being your full career.
Well, my mom was a programmer, so I got my first IBM XT like right when they came out. And so like when I was 13, I got my first computer. Okay. So I'd always been into computers, BBSs and all that stuff. So there wasn't really a time I can remember that I didn't have some kind of computer around the house. So it was always one of those things that I was always into, but I liked photography. I wanted to do that as a career. And then turned out that back then that's when we had to actually process film, and it was all black and white. And
Drop
first
it off,
jobs
wait 4 days, and then get it.
Oh no, do it yourself. You do it yourself.
Yeah.
I did a for my 21st birthday, I did a 2.5 month trip to Europe with my girlfriend and her friend. And I took 270 rolls of film with me and got back and had to process them all myself, which took forever. And for context, I still haven't even scanned them all. I still have a stack of them here that I still haven't even scanned. It's been that long.
I've got all these records behind me, and I want to put them into Discogs, and I just can't get the motivation to get started. I know how big of a project it's going to be. So
exactly.
I totally get that.
Well, and it's funny the way you're talking about sort of your early days on the computer and everything. Cause I mean, really, I don't know how old you are, but I think we're sort of contemporary, same thing. I got my first Tandy when I was, 13 or 12. And, and actually we had a beautiful Epson dot matrix printer at the time. And, but to be on the internet in that period of time, like you did have to kind of do it from scratch, and there weren't books yet, you couldn't just Google, Hey, how do I do this? Or grab a Squarespace, account or something. Like none of that was a thing yet.
Yeah.
And
we were making it up as we went along. I learned from reading the HTML 1.0 spec.
Wow.
Since I worked at Kinko's, I printed it out and bound it and put a nice little cover on it that I made in Kai's Power Tools, if you remember that. Because we were working in Photoshop 2.0 back in the day, before there were even layers. And I read that backwards to forwards and front and sideways, and would go on bulletin boards and learned how to write Perl scripts, learned Unix shell and things like that. And we were making it up. That was the wild, wild west. And it was just a ton of fun back in the day.
Can you talk about, you come into LA and you're all of a sudden working for clients like Stone Temple Pilots, A&M Records, Star Trek, all these huge clients. Can you talk about like the protocol working on a website like that in the early days? I mean, there's no like Slack. They didn't have GitHub. How did you manage code? What was like... what was that all? How was that?
Did you become the developer by virtue of the fact that you were the only guy that knew how to run the computer?
Well, there were a couple of us, like early days guys, like Brian Schulmeister, my co-host on Grumpy Old Geeks. We met at my first legit dev shop. That was Box Top Interactive. And that's where I did Stone Temple Pilots with Brian. And we worked on Barbie, believe it or not, and, just some crazy stuff. But the protocol was we would sit there in the same room and just share code and look over each other's shoulders. And it was all FTP. There was no source code control. There was no repositories back then. It was just, okay, we all got a folder. It's on the shared drive. Let's upload. And you just sit there and upload it and wait. That was kind of it. And one person kind of owned the project. So the one developer on each project really kind of did it. And this is back in the days when design was tables, to get anything to line up, there was tables. So everybody would be like yelling at everybody else. It's like, how the hell do I get this damn thing to line up? And so we were just, like I said, we were making it up as we went along. And it was just, it was an interesting time because there was no precedent. There were no books, I think the first book that I actually bought was Learn Perl in 31 Days. I only got to day 27, but I read that. I had that book on my desk for probably 7 years. And it
just
was
a reference
that book
to go to.
Yeah, that book was it, man. That was what got me through most of it before PHP came out. And then once PHP came out, then I just switched to that, and it was all, lamp stack all the way down for the rest of my career. But I never want to see a Perl scripter or regex again. Trust me. That's bad news.
Well, yeah, it's so funny because like people today, like I think, especially if you're of the generation where you grew up and this was always part of your life, right? Like for people like us, there was a few years there where this stuff didn't exist. So we had a little bit of, our youth to sort of go out and play. But once the kids that are being born now, like I have a 14-year-old and my 14-year-old has never lived a moment of his life without some kind of device or internet connectivity or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I guess they don't know how good they got it. I guess the only saving grace actually right now screaming upstairs is my 14-year-old as he's in a digital literacy course learning Microsoft Access right now.
Oh, what? Do you hate your children?
I know, right? I have no idea why he's learning it. I can't figure it out. My entire life, I've never used
Protective
Access.
Services, call them now.
No joke, right? Yeah, no, we're gonna have to send a strongly worded letter to the teacher, I think, because Access is not only a waste of time, but it really difficult waste of time.
I had to use Access back in the day for mail merge, and it was just a nightmare. I hated it.
I was a FileMaker Pro guy, so I always did FileMaker instead. But
it's funny. You got a 14-year-old. My little brother, we're 20 years apart. So I'm 49. He's 29. And he never grew up without a computer, because he would, like my entire life, he would get my hand-me-downs, from the day he came out of the womb. He basically had a computer in front of him or some kind of device. So it's like, it goes back a long way now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it really does.
So, I love your guys' podcast, by the way. For those of you who haven't heard, he's the host of the Grumpy Old Geeks, and it fits me perfectly because I'm kind of nerdy and I'm really grumpy. And your guys' topic matter and your sense of humor back and forth is great. After such a long career in computers and websites, how did you get into podcasting? Of all things,
well, that's an interesting story because when I was working at startups in San Francisco, after I left the movie business, pardon me, I was working at a company called Technorati, and we were a blog search engine. And my friend Kevin Marks worked there, and he was big into the basically micro formats and things like that, which was, kind of adjacent to RSS because we knew Dave Weiner and Aaron Swartz and all those guys because that was kind of the same time that was all coming around. RSS was huge back then. And so we were all like kind of going to the same bars and having the same conversations when podcasting was literally born. And Kevin wrote one of the first Python scripts to take an RSS enclosure and transfer it to an iPod,
Yeah.
And so I've been around podcasting kind of since its inception, and I've always been a fan of it. I always wanted to do it, but I was still making good money actually writing code. So it took a long hiatus. And there was a time when I ran a blogging network called MetBlogs or Metro Blogging. And one day, this kid rolls into town and he's trying to make a new network of friends. And this guy's called Jordan Harbinger. He's just a nobody. He's running a podcast called the Pickup Podcast because he was a pickup artist. And they had a company that taught guys how to pick up women.
All right.
But he's a cool guy. We went out to lunch and basically became friends. And they needed tech stuff. Basically, they had a really terrible WordPress site, which I know is kind of redundant. But I came on as their tech guy, and I was working with them, and I engineered myself out of a job because I just set up all the systems and the processes and everything to get them up to speed. And so they could take it over themselves. And when that was kind of coming to an end, Jordan's show was starting to, really ramp up. He'd just gotten Robert Greene on the show, and he's like, I think we can really take this seriously now. But the other guys in the company were like, yeah, you go have your little fun pet project. And he's like, do you want to come be my producer and help me out? I need help booking guests, recording shows. Because, even back then, this was 8 years ago. And the tech for doing this stuff wasn't there like we're doing now. It was not there. I mean, we had Skype at the best of times. And so I came on as his producer, and that's when I put down my coding hat and said, never again. I retired from, basically, I wrote my last WordPress template for his company, then moved into being his producer. And right after that, about maybe 3 weeks after I started Grumpy Old Geeks, which is coming up on 8 years in March or April, I think. And haven't looked back since. I've been a professional podcaster since then.
Wow. Can you talk about the early days of podcasting? What tech did you use? How did it, with the lack of Skype or these Zencaster tools that we have readily available right now, how did you record remote? Did you record remote? Was everything in person? What software were you using as far as, was it Audacity, or Adobe products or, tell us about the early days for you.
Okay. So the early days, we had Skype. But you had to do mix minuses back then. And so we would use full on mixing boards. Like I had a PreSonus, I think it was a Studio 16 mixing board that Jordan had bought, couldn't figure out how to use it. He kind of knew how to use it, but you had to carry it in a backpack if you were traveling with it. It was huge. And he's like, I hate this thing. You're the producer here. You can have it. And I'm like, oh my God, look at that. Look at all these knobs. I don't know what anything is. I was used to recording just USB shows. The high point of my tech at that point was I figured out how to do multiple USB mics on the same Mac into like one thing, because you're not supposed to be able to do two USB microphones onto a Macintosh or a PC back then. And I figured out how to do three.
Wow.
Like, okay, this is cool. Yeah, that was, you have to use audio MIDI controls and create all these virtual devices. And you can only do that in GarageBand, which I don't wish on anybody. But I was doing all my editing back then in a program I still use today for like, it's kind of like my Swiss Army knife. It's called Sound Studio. It's a Mac app, costs $40. Greatest little multi-track editor. You can only record in 2 tracks, but you can edit in multiple, you can add as many tracks as you want. But that thing was my Swiss Army knife. There was no, there was no non-destructive editing. So it was all you clip it, you move it, it's gone. And you have to like add buffer silent sections to make things sound right. It was a nightmare. We used no filters. I didn't have Isotope back then. There were no Waves plugins that we were using, nothing like that. It was, just trying to figure stuff out. And when it came to the remote stuff, we would just kind of mash it all together, and it was just 1-track recordings, and it was terrible. So at one point I said, this is ridiculous. I got this PreSonus, monster here. So I went out and I bought a bunch of Mac Minis, and then I created accounts on the Mac Minis, ran all those through the PreSonus. So everybody would like dial into a separate machine that I would then put together and pipe everything back out.
Wow.
So everybody could hear it. I'm recording separate tracks on all the Minis, and plus my iMac that I had, and I think back then I was using a Zoom H4n, and moved up to the H6 eventually, to have like a separate redundant safety recording, because it was all about safety. There's nothing like taking a year to book a client and then losing the recording. Yeah. It is the worst. That happened to me twice, and it has never happened since, because I am the king of redundancy. Even right now, we're recording this. You guys are recording this. I'm recording this in Zoom, but I'm also recording this on my Mix Pre. So I've got like, there's more recordings than we can shake a stick at.
I love
Better
that.
safe than sorry. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, so was there something about podcasting technology in particular, since you were sort of there at its inception, that led you to believe that this might be something? There are obviously a lot of technologies burgeoning in that time, lots of new stuff coming up and all that. But was there something specific about podcasting technology that drew you to it?
It scratched all my itches from software development, plus my gear acquisition syndrome.
I had the same problem.
Yeah. I couldn't wait for a new phone or something else, a laptop to come out, because I could say back as a developer, I'm like, I need to have this because my clients are going to have it. So I need to be able to know what's going on and be able to coach my clients on it, which was a legitimate thing back then. It's like, okay, the new iPhone's out. I need to be able to develop for it. This is out. I need to be able to develop for it. So I had carte blanche to buy all the crap that I wanted. But when it got to podcasting, it's like, oh, I really need this for work. And so that really scratched that itch. And when it came to the software side of things, it was like, software developers love challenges. Like if something is broke, you got to fix it. If it's not broken, then where's the fun in it? You got to figure things out. And there was a lot of that, and a lot of what we did in software, which was A/B testing, because we're trying to figure out how to grow a show. There's so many different things around podcasting that you need to figure out. And, it was just one of those things where, being a software developer, it was just natural to roll into podcasting for me. I was never an audio guy. I was a visual guy. Like I said, I went to school for photography. So I never thought audio was going to be my thing. And my ears suck because I went to too many punk rock shows as a kid. So
I like it.
That does come back, by the way. You can train yourself to get your ears back, which I found.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, It's funny because I think now, especially, for people who might be getting into podcasting now, it can be deceptively easy, right? There's a whole spectrum of things, but it can be as basic as just getting on your iPhone and talking into it, via some of these apps and things like that, all the way to highly complex, almost like radio type setups where you've got, mixing boards and all this kind of stuff. But I think too, the other part that people don't think of is, sure, I can get like the barrier to entry of getting a show on the air is relatively easy, but how do we then promote the show or do anything else beyond that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a ton of moving parts. Yes, it is easy to create a podcast. That is, not not really up for contention at this point. But to create a good podcast takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of sometimes gear and time and learning. You know, there's so many things that go into it that nobody really thinks about at the beginning. Audio quality is king. If you don't have good audio coming out of the gate, those are table stakes nowadays. You have to have good audio coming out of the gate. And recording a podcast on your phone, it's like, I can't listen to some shows if the audio isn't good. I mean, I literally have to turn it off.
I'll shut it off if there's mouth noise. Like if there's any,
yes.
like, I can't handle that. Like if there's Robert Kiyosaki is, one of his audiobooks was recorded early days, and there's a lot of mouth noises, and I made it into like the first chapter before I shut it off. I'm like, I can't listen to this book. I can't do it.
Yep. No, so. I will take, actually, if there's a show that I really want to listen to and it's got too much mouth noise, if there's something wrong with it, I will actually download the file and fix it and then re-listen to it. And if it's a friend of mine, then I'll send him back the file and say, here, swap this out.
Swap this one up. That's a commitment, but it's so true. And, you know, I think it's good to sort of distinguish the difference between sort of, you know, what can be done versus what should be done, right? Or this spectrum of good to bad, because I think things like YouTube and, you know, Vine and some of these viral, you know, TikTok, even some of these things that are out there now where, you know, really quality doesn't matter all that much, right? I mean, you know, you could go shoot something in cinematic 4K or whatever, but honestly, you're going to be okay if you shot it on your iPhone too. Like if the content's funny, it's funny. And so I think that there was like a moment there where the race was, how good can you make technology? And then suddenly there was this stop where we went, oh, wait a minute, you don't have to be good. You can just kind of do this. And so it's good to hear. And I agree. I think, you know, as you start to separate sort of wheat from the chaff in the podcasting space, it is that, right? It's audio quality, it's content, it's guests, it's things like that. But I think that there is definitely a distinction between recording yourself on your iPhone and, you know, publishing something that, you know, is meant to be heard by many people.
Right. You know, you look for your minimum viable audio. And for a lot of people, it's going to be different because their ears are different. You know, I've listened to well over, you know, 10 to 15,000 podcasts, you know, so when I started podcasting, all I did was listen to other shows. So I would like, even now to this day, I will go in and pick 5 shows that in the top 200 on different players and just listen to them so I can hear what's going on, see what people are doing, get ideas and things like that. But your ears get trained when you listen to other people's shows. And those little foibles you learn to fix, you know, like mouth noise. I have a filter stack in Isotope RX8 Advanced that I run all of my audio through. And the first thing that it goes through is mouth declick. And you can get that for like $50. You know, that's a plugin you can get for $50. You don't have to get the whole RX8 Advanced package, which will run you anywhere between $700 and $1,500, depending on what sales are on that week. But there are things that you can do to get rid of those annoyances that will help people, because I did find out after listening to, you know, tens of thousands of podcasts that I developed misophonia, which is that horrible thing that if you hear mouth noise, it physically makes you just angry. You get angry. My back tenses up just thinking about it, and you want to kill somebody. You know, you seriously want to strangle somebody. And, you know, you can take that out because just doing that one step alone will expand your audience because more people have that than you think. And it's a simple step that you just put into your workflow, adds a couple minutes to it, but you never even notice it because it's just done now. It's all automated. And then when you spit your audio back out, then that problem has been solved. There are ways to just engineer around that and get it done that doesn't take up too much time or cost too much money.
Yeah. And the more I've thought about it too, like it does seem like, at least in the podcast production realm, it feels like layering things on is how you improve or how you start to separate yourself from the others, right? So it's like you're saying, I mean, even that one filter would make your show better than anyone who didn't run that filter. And
exactly.
You know, whatever it is, the next filter, or, you know, having good quality podcast art or a good write-up or whatever it is that is your different layer, you know, every one of these layers or bits that you can add to it, the better your show gets and the further it sort of steps out there ahead of others. So I think it's important to call out each of those little things because it doesn't take a lot to start differentiating yourself.
Yeah, because people just don't know what to do at this point. They're like, okay, I need all these steps, and they get overwhelmed and they skimp on a lot of them. It's just like, okay, here's my show art, here's a graphic. It's terrible. I paid somebody on Fiverr to do it, but it's done, and I don't even think about it again. But it's like, okay, if you spend a day on it, and maybe $100 or $200, and you find a real designer, that's going to differentiate you, and over time, that is going to bring you more listeners. And remember, this podcasting compounds. It's like, okay, I have 10 listeners this week. I have 15 next week. Next week, I have 30. And then I got 60 because word of mouth gets out there because you're putting out a quality product. And those little things are the differentiators that you really want to pay attention to.
Can you actually talk about that as far as scaling a podcast? You've been producing for several prominent podcasts. Jordan Harbinger has done really well in this industry. Your podcast has done really well. Can you talk about growing it from, mom and pop to a successful podcast?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to like anything else in podcasting. There are a lot of angles that you have to pay attention to. You have to look at your niche and where you're narrowing your scope of your show. Who are you talking to? How many people are literally out there that could possibly listen to your show? Like Grumpy Old Geeks, we're not a big show. We got about 12,000 listeners to that show because there aren't a lot of people who care about tech news and care about drunken old fat guys who like to swear a lot. So that, we have a self-selecting sample, but what we do have is a very happy core audience that is willing to support us. So, some shows that have, 10 times the numbers we have probably make less money than we do because they're just throwing everything at the wall and putting something out for everyone. So I always recommend, know your audience, know your niche, know where you can surgically place yourself in the marketplace. Also, do what we're doing right now. I'm talking to you guys. I'm being exposed to your audience right now. And so if you have a podcast, go on other people's shows because you're going to get exposed to their audience. And this is how we grew the Jordan Harbinger show, because that show came out of what was the Art of Charm at that point. And that show was stolen from us. His business partners literally stole the company, and we were out on the street and we had to start from nothing. And in not even a year, we started that show in February 2018. And by the end of February 2018, we won the award for the Best of Apple, one of the most downloaded new shows. Wow. So we took that show literally from zero to getting an Apple award, which is algorithmic. That's not an editorial decision. That is by the numbers. And Jordan went on over 100 shows that year to get his name out and tell his story and get everybody back in and say, hey, we're out here, we're doing a show. That kind of thing is fantastic. Engage with your audience. We started a Discord channel for Grumpy Old Geeks. Cost us nothing. We pop in there a couple times a day, talk to the fans. And we've got like over 500 people now who just pop into our Discord channel off and on. Keeps them engaged. They give us show ideas too. And we talk about different things that we've discussed on the show, and it makes our show better because we know what they want. Fan engagement is massive. You can't have a great show unless you have fan engagement, I think. That's one of those things. And that's another thing that Jordan does. He responds to every email anybody sends him. And
no, I think that's awesome. Well, and I was going to ask, so because I think a lot of people see these guys, right? I mean, maybe Jordan may have been more in his infancy when he came to you and you guys started working together. But, when you look at like the Tim Ferrisses and the Kevin Roses, and I'm detecting a tech-centric vibe with these types of guys. So I guess there's, San Francisco collusion there happening. But
yeah, a little bit.
But I'm wondering, like those guys, for example, those two in particular. I mean, Tim Ferriss, pretty wildly successful author in the pre-podcast world. Same with Kevin Rose, very popular on tech TV and places like that before, in the before time. So when those guys come to podcasting, they bring an audience, and that doesn't necessarily mean their show's going to be great and successful, but it does feel like a leg up. So I think it's good to hear what you're saying about sort of Jordan's growth. Going from, where he really did have to just go, not to say those guys didn't earn their audiences, they earned it in different ways or whatever. But, for Jordan to have sort of started, I guess, again, more or less at zero, I'm sure there was some stragglers that came along and stuff, but,
we still get people to this day that have never seen that we moved.
Yeah.
We get tweets every, at least once a week from somebody like, oh, I didn't know you guys moved. Just like, we were talking before the show, you guys heard episode 450 from Grumpy Old Geek, which is, 40 episodes behind. Sometimes people just kind of fall off and come back and fall off and come back. But,
well, it's actually one of the things I really like about the podcasting platform itself is this idea that sort of, the tide raises all ships, so whether they come in now and start listening from now going forward, typically they'll go back and listen to some old catalog stuff or, whatever. I mean, like there's a show I love called My Brother and Me. And I think that we have managed to go back, me and my kids love it. And I think we've managed to go back and listen to the whole dang thing, like all 500 something episodes. And, but it began with, now I'm listening to their current show. Well, now I have to wait until next week. So, okay, well, what did they do 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago or last year?
Yep.
And so I think it's a really cool platform in that sense that you're, it's not like a radio broadcast where you're sort of one and done. Rather, it's something that can sort of continue to grow, even if it is sort of in your past.
Yep. We have fans that go back and listen to our entire back catalog, which I never recommend. I say, don't go back. Those old shows are terrible. Do not listen to the old shows. But if they do, they come back and they say, we listened to the whole thing. We'll send them stickers and magnets and whatever we can, whatever swag we have, just to say thank you for going back and doing it. Because I know how painful it is to do it. So I was there. I know. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny. I mean, like even in the history of this show, I mean, our first 10 episodes were me and Mike doing research on some topic and regurging it at people. And, so we've left them up for posterity, but it's at the same time, it's like, if you went back and listened to that, I mean, we've still got, we're improving every episode, but if you were to go back and listen to those things, it really makes a great illustration of just how far things have come. I mean, you're going to be episode 190 for us. And so, I mean, we've been at this, a little more than 3 years now. And it is fun to go back, fun in a painful kind of way, to go back and just see, how bad it once was to the things we're doing these days.
Yeah, I'm going back through the entire Grumpy Old Geeks catalog and having everything transcribed. And I have to listen to some of them. And it's just like, oh, man, what was I thinking? But the fun part about it is it's like, since we talk about ourselves on the show, it's kind of like our diary,
I love that. That is one of my favorite things about podcasting and having just general open conversations with people like you and our other guests is we actually are talking about stuff that's relevant to our personal lives. And we're trying to get through stuff. And it just is, it's nice to sit back and listen to like, oh man, that I got through that. That's cool. And it's almost like, you said, writing in your diary and being able to, have that history there. So I love it.
Yeah. I mean, Brian, my co-host, when we first started, he was living in a bachelor pad loft with his girlfriend in Venice Beach, California. Now he's got like a 5-year-old kid and owns a house in Toronto. There's a long story that goes with that, Yeah. So it's cool to be able to go back and just kind of, just see the progress. And you can hear like, at least our audio progress as we went. Because we started out with the worst microphone on the planet. And it grew from there.
Yeah, Speaking of that, because our show was blessed from the beginning because Mike's background's in audio engineering. And he has that same addiction you mentioned earlier where you buy all the gear. So from the beginning, we were way outclassed by our equipment. So it was a good deal for me anyway.
I was actually going to ask you about equipment. I obviously know a lot about it. You know a lot about it, but our listeners, we haven't really ever broken that down for them. And since this is kind of a podcasting centric show now, and you're one of the guys to talk to, would you break down a entry level setup and then your actual setup, what you take on the road and what you use in your house?
All right, entry-level setup. I always recommend the Samson Q2U or I think it's the ATR 2100X because they discontinued the old Audio-Technica 2100 and the AT2005. I always loved the AT2005 because it was cooler looking than the 2100. The internals are the same on all three of those mics, but they're all sub $100. The 2100X is USB-C now, so you have that connector. This one, though, is my new favorite. Here, let me show you.
For those of you watching the video, I just want to explain this right now. I don't know. It's not switching, so I put it on all three of us. So Ryan, I know you're confused, but I don't know what's going on. So I want to apologize for that for everyone watching the video right now. Go ahead.
All right. This is the Shure MV7. It's $250, but it's XLR and USB. So it's nice like that. But it sounds almost identical to a Shure SM7B. But you can take it on the road with you. Yes, I've got several of those around here. I got like 20 mics around here.
Right.
But this one, let me take off the cloud lifter so it doesn't fall off the table here. Got more cloud lifters in my house than I know what to do with too. That mic, it's $250, but it is professional grade. I did a couple episodes of Grumpy Old Geeks with it, and nobody knew the difference from my $600 microphone that I'm talking to you on right now to that mic, which is really annoying. But the fact that it's USB and XLR means you can use it in just different form factors. Like if I'm going to go on the road, I can take that with me. It's small enough that it fits in my bag, plugs into my laptop, and I can still do the same show. Or I can plug it into my interface and use it at home like I normally would. So that's intermediate. But for beginners, always recommend Samson Q2U or one of the Audio Technicas. Obviously not a Blue Yeti. That's my least favorite microphone. And I've gotten in more internet wars over that microphone than I care to think of. But I'll just tell the people who have one who are screaming at their podcast player right now, it's not the microphone itself. The microphone is fine if you're in a studio. You're not in a studio. You're in your house. And that is the microphone if you want to hear a dog fart 3 houses down. It's a condenser mic that has a very, very good pickup on it. And you don't know how to use it as a new podcaster. You have no mic technique. You're going to put it on the middle of a table and have everybody shout at it. And that's not how that microphone works. And it's overpriced for what it is. For $50 more, you can get the Shure MV7 and have a fantastic mic. And that will last you forever because Shure mics are indestructible. So I highly recommend that.
So I went down a road of wanting to open a podcasting studio at one point, and I bought a nice Midas console and 4 of the Shure SM7Bs with the Cloud Lifter CL4 for 4 mics, and just spent way too much money on gear I didn't need, and now it's all sitting in boxes in a back room. But I decided I sold the Midas and I switched to the Behringer X32 rack. And I love it because I can do 30 channels of multi-track recording, and it's under $1,000, and it's USB. And the thought process behind it was I wanted to do audio for conferences and be able to live stream them at the same time. And so I wanted to have the ability to do panel discussions with 15 or 16 microphones. And I actually love it because it's got a small footprint. I can have my headphone splitter, my CL4 for the mic pickups, and it's an amazing all-in-one kind of unit. So I don't know if you've ever looked into it, but I'm in love with it. I've only had it for a month or 2 now. So
no, I'll check that out. I've actually got behind me, I don't know, the lights are off. I've got a PreSonus Studio 192, which is a rack-mounted 8-port nice. XLR with really nice preamps. I've got it in a 2U case with a Furman power conditioner on it, so I can pick it up, put it in the briefcase, and take it on the road with me, and have all the mics in a backpack, and have a 4-person show anywhere I go.
That's great. The 2U is I mean, that's so slim. 2U is great. So
well, they're both 1Us. The PreSonus is a 1U and the Furman's a 1U. So I have a 2U Gator case.
Oh,
so
it
looks like a briefcase. It just looks like a badass briefcase that you're taking around with you.
That's awesome.
And I've got 2 of those here because one thing I found as a professional is you always have to have 2 of everything because
definitely
right before that big show, one of them's going to crap out on you.
Yeah, back to that redundancy thing.
Always have redundancy. Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, I mean, clearly just from our conversation, now I had written this question in advance, but now having talked to you, it becomes a little more clear. But I wanted to talk to you about one of the other things that keeps people out of podcasting, and that is the sound of their own voice. Traditionally, and of course this is a stereotype, but typically your web developer type is not the extrovert that's dying to be out in front of people or hosting their own show as you do. Obviously you began as a photographer, but two, I wouldn't say that's a wildly extroverted career, generally speaking. And so what drew you to hosting and what got you into, I guess, did it come naturally for you to become an entertainer yourself, or was that something you really had to work into?
Had to work into it. I am a dyed-in-the-wool introvert. I hate being out in front of people. I can do it. I can turn it on when I have to. When the mic turns on, I turn on. When the mic turns off, leave me alone. Period. And when it comes down to the sound of your own voice, you're going to hate it. You're going to hate it for a long time. I took voice lessons, which I still do vocal training every now and again when I can find a decent teacher at a decent price. I highly recommend getting some basic vocal training. Once you start to get into podcasting and you love it, you won't pop your P's or have plosives, and you learn how to breathe, and you don't do the normal stuff that most people do that aren't, trained on it. And I am by no means an expert voice guy. Like, I could not get a job as a voice actor, period. But it at least makes my podcast sound better because I know how to breathe and I don't turn blue in the middle of a sentence. So that stuff, once you get into it, definitely look into voice training. And there's online stuff that you can find for sure. I think Roger Love is a pretty decent one. He's got really good warm-ups that you can do. It takes 15 minutes in the morning. Your voice gets really limber and things like that, and you can talk all day. Because in the beginning, I couldn't do more than an hour, and I couldn't talk for the rest of the day. Now I can talk for 8 hours straight. It's not a big thing. And listen to yourself a lot. Edit yourself. You have to be the editor of your own show when you start, period. Do not put that off on somebody else, because you're going to learn your foibles, and you're going to listening to them over and over and over again. It's going to drive home the fact that you say "so" before every sentence. The fact that you say, and you do the smack. Once you have to edit that out about 500 times for the first couple episodes, you'll stop doing it. You'll stop doing it. And the other thing is, when you first start a show, do 3 full episodes, edit them, get them ready to go, and throw them all away and start from scratch. Never release your first 3 episodes. That's my rule of thumb for anybody that's starting.
Well, see, Mike, we had an inflated sense of security because you knew how to tape us.
Yeah, but I still hadn't edited a bunch of pops yet.
So I also wanted to ask you, obviously you've had sort of this, what looks like a storied history in the podcasting space, given the folks that you've worked with. As I'd mentioned, it seemed like, maybe some of those guys are all, maybe it was a little bit of right place, right time, being in San Francisco at the time this technology was emerging, finding these guys who are already a little tech forward and maybe could use the help that you had already begun to pioneer. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about just sort of, what comes from working with people who are maybe more established characters like that versus what you would get out of your own show. I guess what I'm trying to understand is, if you are thinking about doing your own show, or if you're a producer and you want to get maybe involved with the show, it seems like it's a pretty no-brainer to walk into a Tim Ferriss show, for example. But if you can't get that, or if you're trying to do it on your own or something, how do you get started? How do you start, greasing the right palms or finding those people who can sort of help, advance a show or advance a career?
Okay, so here's the history with me and Tim. I knew Tim right before the 4-Hour Workweek came out. So I've been friends with him for a very long time. He started his podcast without me. He did that, and it was going for a while. And the way I got to start working with Tim, and this is germane for anybody who's starting out, you find somebody's show that you want to work with, and you fix it and send them the better audio. And you do that enough times, you're going to get the current guy out the door, and you're going to slide in. And that's exactly what I did. Tim was the guy that got kicked out was Tim, though, because he was editing his own shows. He was terrible at it. That was easy. But and from there, once you get your foot in the door and you get an established client, then it's easy to get other established clients once you have a track record of doing good work. You have to do good work. If you're doing crappy work, nobody's going to recommend you. Almost all of my business is word of mouth. Kevin Rose is a friend. I knew him back when he started Dig. So that was another, nepotism one. Joey Ito from the MIT Media Lab, another old buddy from the blogging days. So I reached back into my network from the tech days when these guys started podcasting, but they all started without me, and I came in later and helped fix the shows. Noah Kagan was one of the only people that's kind of in tech that I had to look at the show art to make sure I got his name right. I worked with him for a while and started his show, and then bounced after a while, and a couple other people I did that with too. But all of the people I've generally worked with are word of mouth. And so once you get one good client, you do good work. When somebody else says, hey, I want to start a podcast, they're going to say, hey, check out my guy. And all of my other friends who are producers and editors in the business, that's how they get their work. It's all word of mouth. You have to do good work, and you have to be easy to work with. You have to be easy to work with.
Yeah, that's critical. Having worked with these bigger shows and been a co-host on the Jordan Harbinger show and your show, is there any time over your career that you've met someone that's just like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm talking to this guy? And then
so many.
Yeah. Can you tell us about one of those experiences and just how podcasting kind of opened the door to that experience?
Yeah, I mean, just doing the show booking with Jordan and being guests on the show. The first show that I was a guest on with him was this private detective named Stephen Rombaum. He's a guy that used to speak at the 2600 Hope Conference, the Hackers on Planet Earth conference, and just a really interesting guy. And I was just like, I was a nervous wreck, but I've always liked this guy. He does a talk. You can actually look it up on YouTube. It's called Privacy is Dead, Get Over It. And I did research on this guy. I did deep dives, and I found stories that nobody had ever talked to him about. And we got to talk about it on the show, and he was blown away. And I was just like, oh, this is how it's done. This is so cool. And that really got me over the fear of doing it. So when we had other bigger guests on that were just like really fun, like Chris Hadfield, the astronaut. Took me a year and a half to get that guy booked. And when he came on, he was super untech savvy, but just an interesting guy. Here's another thing. Astronauts do not they just have no idea how to use Skype. I don't know what it is.
I'm proving that right now with the video issues. So
yeah, we had Chris Hadfield on, and we had Mike Massimino on, and neither one of those guys figured out how to use Skype. It was funny.
Have you listened to Mike Massimino's book? That is an amazing book. Anyone that hasn't checked it out, I can't remember the title of it. Just Google it. He's got an autobiography, and it is amazing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And we talked about something I didn't even know was a thing you could do as a blind person half the time. He did this thing. His eyesight wasn't good enough to get into the space program. So he literally exercised his eyes with an eye trainer and got his eyesight better by doing eye exercises and stretching the muscles and strengthening them. It was just like amazing. Yeah. That was a really fun one. I'm trying to think. There's so many cool ones. I think I got to go to Robert Greene's house, the guy that wrote the 50 Laws of Power and all those 50 Laws books. When he did his new book launch, we got to go to his house and do the show live. And that was really, really cool because I'm a huge fan of his. Yeah, there's just so many people that I've met that I never would ever get to talk to. But that's the great part about podcasting is you get to meet these people and you have a conversation with them. And if you need something from them later, you can say, hey, I did this show. I want to do an intro for you or something like that. You have that in. And, always just keep up with those people too. If you have great guests, always keep in touch with them and just say, how you doing? You don't ask for anything. Just, be cool and say, hey, I saw you on this thing and I wanted to say, I thought you were great. Things like that. Just honest conversations with people. That's really going to help you in the future too.
Well, I think one of the things that you sort of keep touching on that I really like actually is I think that, there's this vibe out there that people can sort of, once I start podcasting, they will listen, right? If I build it, they will come. And I think that, there's also sort of this, and maybe it's just sort of this instant gratification internet world we live in where we feel like, if it's not working in 3 or 4 episodes, then screw it. It's just not going to work. Move on. And so
the Grumpy Old Geek story with that, right?
No, go ahead.
When we started Grumpy Old Geeks, we said, if we don't make money by the end of the 10th episode, we're going to quit. It was episode 150, I think. It was in the 100, in the first hundreds where we made our first $1.
We're still in debt.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working on that.
Well, no. We didn't get out of debt, but we got our first dollar in. It took us another couple hundred episodes before we actually paid off all the equipment that I bought and all the hosting and all that. But
I think we might have made like 10 cents from an Amazon referral link. That's
yeah, we did.
Those are a waste of time.
Well, so I wondered though, sort of in that realm, and understanding. I mean, I really like that some of your conversation is really circling around the fact that it is a slow burn and it does require just time and effort. I mean, that's a big part of it. There are no like hacks or get rich quick kind of things when it comes to podcasting. But I wondered, and you've maybe mentioned a couple of these things, but I wonder if there are any specific things that maybe the you of today would look at the younger you if you were going and starting a show today, if there were some things that you might avoid.
What would I avoid? Well, bad audio quality would be the first one. Always have good audio. Learn your equipment. I was just figuring out as I went, and I didn't read the manual. That was the one thing when I got that PreSonus 16 channel mixer, I locked myself in my room for a week and I learned everything about it. I learned how, attacks and releases worked, how gates worked, how compressors worked, all that by reading the manual. I wish I would have read the manual sooner.
So nerd question, do you record with your compression and gates and all that enabled, or you just all fix it in post? Because I just do it all in post and just get the raw and then add compression and everything to the vocals in post.
Nowadays, I do almost everything in post. I'm recording right now through, to go back to your other question on what I'm using now. I've got a Mix Pre 6 and a Mix Pre 3 on my desk, and I go back and forth between them depending on my client work that I'm doing because I have to teach people how to use them. So that's the other thing. I always have the equipment that my clients have. The only thing that I turn on these is the limiter. I keep the limiter on.
Just to keep it from clipping.
Yeah, well, these are also the 32-bit recorders, so it's impossible to clip. But if I do that, then I have to take them into Audition, and I'm allergic to Audition. So because Logic doesn't handle 32-bit float files yet. But yeah, the only thing I record with now is the limiter. But for a long time, I was using all the stuff on the board just to learn what it did, and that turned out to bite me in the ass too many times. So I recommend everybody record as raw as possible and learn how to fix it in post. Don't just say, oh, I recorded it and it's going out the way it is. Learn how to fix it in post. Yeah,
there's just a nightmare story that we had when we first got started. We used, what was it, Zencaster?
Mm-hmm.
We used them for a bit, and there was a problem with shifting audio when you would download the actual file. And I can't tell you how many times I literally had to clip every sentence or every word out of the conversation and create an hour-long podcast because it shifted all the audio so far off, and it took me 4 hours to edit. But that's you've probably had similar stories.
Even when I was using the minis, there would be drift because the clock speed on the different machines are all different. So you have a reference recording that's everybody on one track, and you have to cut it and line it up and readjust it as the audio goes because everybody falls out of phase. And I have to say, right now, Squadcast has fixed a lot of the drift problems. They've got some really cool proprietary algorithms. I don't get drift anymore if I use Squadcast.
Squadcast/GOG.
Actually, squadcast.fm/GOG. Yes.
Yeah, get it right if we're going to send you a referral. So I wanted to ask you too, just as we're starting to get to the close here, I wonder if we could talk just a little bit about sort of learning the business. So we've talked a lot about sort of the technical aspects of producing a show and doing all that stuff. But, early in the conversation, we touched on, all these other things, podcast artwork and show notes and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about just sort of the processes and the efficiencies that you guys use, maybe on these larger scale shows, but maybe even on a young show that's trying to grow? The way that you might learn to build a business around your show, because I think, for people who've been in podcasting for a few years, it feels pretty commonplace and it feels everywhere, but I think it's still sort of in the infancy of that business. And so while you can find more resources now than ever, there's still not straight answers on how to make your specific show make money. And so I wondered if you'd just talk a little bit about sort of the rest of the production outside of just the actual show itself.
Okay. First thing I would tell everybody to do is open up Google Sheets and start a spreadsheet with every episode that you're going to do for the year and create slots for the ads that you want to fill. That will give you a goal to start filling those ads and get you off your ass to go get things going. And also, as far as the making money thing goes, there are 3 different ways that most people make money on podcasts. There's direct sales advertising. So, you get ads, you read them on the show, or you get dynamically inserted ads and those get slotted in. Or you have something like Patreon where the fans just pay you money, or you get donations, or you can do affiliate ads, like things like we use private internet access, which is a VPN that we talk about on our show all the time. That one mention that we do every now and again for private internet access has made us well over $20,000 through the lifetime of the show. And we didn't have to ask permission. We didn't have to sell the company on letting us, promote them. We just signed up for it. And we started writing our own ads, writing our own copy and recording ads and slotting them in. And over time, you can make money on your show with it because you don't have to have download numbers for that. You just have to have a good ad for a product that matches your audience. And then if they buy, you get paid. And if you find good affiliates that have recurring revenue, like if they, like with the VPN, it's like they buy a year. If they re-up next year, you still get another cut. We've got people that have been paying us for 5 years on that. So when it comes to the making money side of things, you're not going to make a lot of money on direct sales ads right now. It's tough. And we make a lot more money on just basically asking our fans to support us. Our Patreon account and our PayPal donations make it, probably 10x what direct sales ads do. So that is kind of the route that we've taken. I would love to never have an ad on Grumpy Old Geeks again, period, just to be fan supported. But you just have to keep cranking out content and asking people to do it, and people do it. And I love that model for independent podcasters. If you're trying to make a big show, you're doing a true crime show or things like that, then you're going to partner with like maybe a network or an ad sales company like Ad Results or something like that to sell ads for you. They're going to take half the money and somebody else is probably going to take another cut. And you still have to pay for, the dynamic ad technology and things like that. So it just gets whittled down and whittled down. So you have to have huge download numbers to really make money on that. I love independent podcasting. That's what I've done my entire career. And I recommend everybody start a podcast because, the more people are doing it, the less we have to deal with the Spotifys and Joe Rogans of the world. Let's just all have fun and, have our audience pay us for giving them a good product.
So Jason, before we let you go, I know we're kind of getting there on time. I have 2 more questions for you. First one's just a quick kind of, have you seen The Art of Code by Dylan Beetle? It's
no,
have not. YouTube. Highly recommend you check it out. It rocked my world last night. It goes over, Conway's Game of Life, the Mandelbrot set, and he built he wrote a song on Sonic Pi, which is a digital synth, and he used hard coding programming to do it. About 2 years ago, I went down this 3 or 4 years ago now, actually, it's been a while. I went down this route of wanting to develop an app and launch it to the world. And I had no clue about programming. I had no clue about anything tech wise. I'm a DJ and I have no business being in the industry. And I was thinking, heck, I'll teach myself all these languages and I'll become a front end web developer. And I'm going to get out of the DJ game because it's obviously in COVID right now. I haven't made any money in a while. And, tech was going to be my out. And I was listening to your show and you guys were talking about how, front end web development is going to kind of become a thing of the past that, it's not the route to go. And, I thank you for that, by the way, because I was, beating my head against the wall, trying to figure out what my next step's going to be. And, because you guys, I've kind of started going down a security, more of that route. I'm teaching myself Linux right now. And what I'm getting at is, can you recommend an entry-level person who's having a midlife crisis, what where he should focus.
Cybersecurity is the only place to focus right now.
Okay.
They have 100% employment. They need asses in seats. It is one of the fastest growing sectors, and you can get into it pretty easily. Take some work. You got to get some certifications done, learn the basics, and a lot of places will train you up. There are a lot of resources out there. The government actually has great resources too that you can take classes on. There's just a lot of stuff out there for cybersecurity. Pardon me. And that's really where, if I was getting into tech right now, that's the only thing I would focus on. It is so in demand.
Would you ever go back to tech having done it?
Hell no. I'm too old. I'm 49. The tech is it's, at least with what I did, it was a young man's game because we had to be there 20-hour days because we were figuring things out. It's not like nowadays where things have the paths have been tread. You know what you need to do. It's like, okay, we have to build this. We have to build that. We know what that entails. We never knew what it entailed. We came up with an audacious goal and we would work till we figured it out. And none of us were really good coders back then. We were all just making it up. I'm a terrible coder. I had a really good career as a bad coder. It's fantastic. But it's cybersecurity. Just, I know a lot of people in that. Go to the conferences when they start again. DerbyCon is my favorite. I love those guys. Got drunk with the crystal method at the last DerbyCon I went to.
Nice.
That was fun. But there's so much stuff out there that you can get into. Yeah.
I mean, I'm pushing 40 and I'm feeling like, the DJ game was fun, but I don't have any retirement. I don't have any kind of security or stability. And so that was kind of my thought getting into front end development. And I'm glad that I kind of paused on that, but I'm also glad that I spent the time to learn it just because it's good to know.
It's a useful skill, and you can actually use that in cybersecurity too, because a lot of phishing scams and things like that, they take front ends from websites and rebuild them and make them look like their own. So if you kind of know the basics of how a website's built, you can look at it and kind of sniff it out for what it is.
Dude, I just listened to an episode on Darknet Diaries. We're huge. It was amazing to me how many random thousands and thousands of emails sent to one guy just trying to get him to click one link just to get his info and phishing off of it. So, anyways, Jason, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, hang on. Before we let him go, I got to ask him one more thing because it just came out of that. Well, sorry, if you've got one more minute, I should say.
I got plenty of time. Hit me.
It just came out of the conversation that you and Mike were having. It made me wonder. So if you got into podcasting about 8 years ago, that would have put you at about 40, 41 around the time you decided to make that career change.
Yes.
So, Mike is sort of describing being in a similar situation. And I've actually had some inclinations of maybe switching careers too. I run a marketing agency, but I'm a longtime graphic designer and artist. And so I've been sort of thinking about a career pivot as well. I wondered if you'd just sort of talk about the decision to make the change. So now you maybe sort of stumbled into it, but I mean, at 40 years old to change so dramatically from what's working to trying something new and unique. I wonder if you just sort of talk about it, because to me, it feels like a brave move, right? For me, this idea of a career pivot is like a shift in identity. It's a little bit of a change in who you are and that sort of thing. And I wonder if you had any insights from that experience that, as you experienced it in terms of making that change.
I didn't see it as a brave move. I thought of it as, I just turned 40. It's hard in what I did in tech to get a job at 40 because I was, dealing with the San Francisco people, the Facebook kids. You can't get a job at Facebook at 40, period.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ageism when it came to the stuff that I did, as a lamp stack developer. And that, by the way, cybersecurity does not have that kind of ageism in it. So that's why I say that's future proof. But for me, it came down to life satisfaction. I'm like, I'm miserable doing this. I don't want to do it anymore. So when I saw an opportunity to go into something completely different that was, a new industry that might or might not work, but if I could, at least pay the rent for a while to see if it would kind of pan out. I mean, I had no savings. I lived day to day and paycheck to paycheck. I just did it. And that also lights fire under your ass to make it work. It really does. And I just saw it as an opportunity to do something fun. And I was excited every day when I got up. That's why I put so much time and effort into it. I would work 70 hours a week because I wanted to, not because I had to. And I see that as if you're going to make a change into a sector that you can wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm jazzed about this. I want to learn everything I possibly can about this. And this is what gets me going, because as you get older, you need those things more and more and more. And, I haven't regretted switching to podcasting a day since I did it. Well, maybe 1 or 2 days, but for the most part, it's been pretty awesome. So when it comes to a full career change like that, that was my second real career change, because I went to college for photography and came out and, spending 4 years learning how to take pictures, and then immediately said, no, I'm going to switch and go into computers. And then, from computers to podcasting, so I've had, 2 major career changes since I've been 20, and, each one of them worked out better than the last. I'm happier than I've been since I got out of college, and I love podcasting and I love doing what I'm doing. And if something else comes along, if this whole podcasting thing gets ruined by Spotify and Amazon and all these idiots, these freaking carpetbaggers, then I'll find something else, but for now I still love podcasting. And I just say, if you're going to make that change, make sure that thing that you're going to change to isn't just because you need money or want to make money. Make sure that you can get up in the morning and say, hey, I really want to do this. This is fun. That's what's going to get you through the hump.
Do you still think podcasting is in its infancy, or do you think it's kind of reached a peak?
No, it's totally in its infancy. I mean, there are established players now. The money's come in, obviously, and Spotify is just ruining it for a lot of people. They ruin the music industry, so why not ruin podcasting too? But I ignore them. And I keep on keeping on, because the one thing that they are doing is bringing awareness to podcasting and teaching people that podcasts exist. And it's our job as independent podcasters to teach people that Spotify is not podcasting, much like we had to teach people that AOL is not the internet back in the day.
Wait a minute.
There's
Wait, what?
Yeah. I've still got all these CDs.
Got the CD kicking around. Right? So cool. Well, thanks so much, Jason. I really appreciate your perspective on that, especially just in that we're all sort of contemporaries in age and sort of are going through a move that you taken maybe a few steps ahead of us. And so I think it's good to have those insights, because it's pretty easy to beat yourself down or think, I'm kind of long in the tooth, there's nothing left for me. That kind of thing.
No, don't never think that.
Never 40
think
is
that.
the new 20 or whatever it is now. But but I think it's good to hear that from somebody that sort of paved the way ahead. So
you can always reinvent yourself. There's no reason you can never reinvent yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks so much. And Jason, this has been a tremendous conversation, man. Really, really grateful for your time.
Where can people find you, find your podcast? I don't know if you want people looking you up on Instagram and all that stuff, but feel free to share that with us.
Easy enough. If you just go to jpd.me, all my links are there. So you can find me from there. Instagram, Twitter, and Grumpy Old Geeks, obviously, which is not family friendly. Do not have the kids in the room. Wear a lot.
Love it.
Well, cool. Well, thanks again so much. This has been really great. And Mike, anything in closing? Good?
No, I just want to say thanks. Really appreciate your time.
No, thanks for having me, man. This was actually a really fun conversation. So hopefully we'll stay in touch, and anything you guys need from me in the future, feel free to reach out anytime.
Well, I have. Absolutely. And I actually thank you for giving me some advice on that. I had a couple people asking about editing for them, and I had no clue what to charge them. And so I reached out to you, and you were able to give me some good insight. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, cool. So thanks so much, Jason, and everybody who tunes in this week. Every week, make sure to send the show emails or questions and comments. Engage with us on any of the social platforms, and we will see you all next time.